chulmo molokiwas. Shiadiki chulmo molokiwas. Shiadiki chulmo molokiwas. Shiadiki chulmo molokiwas. Kepakaki ahashil kuku.
Ayuki. Welcome to Reclaiming Our Stories, Voices of Indigenous People of California. Before we begin, I want to invite you to arrive here, wherever you are right now. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're walking, maybe you're sitting somewhere quiet or somewhere loud. Wherever you are, we are glad you're here. nowWhat Victorio Shaw. My name is Victorio Shaw. I am a tribal court judge, an artist, and an attorney, and I am an enrolled citizen of the Hoopa Valley tribe. I am your story weaver, your guide through this series. Think of me less as a host and more as someone who walks alongside you, holding the thread of this conversation as we move through time, memory, and the living present of California Native life. Take a breath. This is a space for listening, for deep listening. In 2026, there will be a lot of noise about America's 250th anniversary. Celebrations, ceremonies, official histories retold in shiny new packaging. But we want to ask a different question. Not what are we celebrating, but whose story is being told, and whose has been purposefully left out. This is a podcast about narrative sovereignty. It is also an invitation to think critically about which stories get told and why. Who benefits from the stories that are never told? California is home to hundreds of distinct Native nations. It has more tribal diversity than anywhere else in the United States. Native peoples have been here since time immemorial. That is not a poetic phrase. It is a fact that predates any colonial timeline. This podcast exists because California Native people are still here, still governing, still creating, still deciding how our stories are told. We determine our own future. This series is a response to erasure, simplification, and extraction in media, in history books, in policy. This podcast is not a history lesson handed to you from the outside. It's an invitation into a relationship with truth, with land, and with the people who have never stopped belonging to it. We are still here, and we will continue to shape the story of this land. This is not a neutral history project. We are not pretending otherwise. Story here is responsibility, not content. The voices in this series are sharing something real, their own truth about their own experience, and we ask you to receive it with care. Listening in this series is an active practice. That means being willing to sit with discomfort, uncertainty, or grief, and not rushing past it. It is an invitation to examine your relationship to California Native people and land. So who is this series for? It is for everyone. It's for Native listeners, so you can be in a space where your experiences are held in their full complexity. It is for non-Native listeners who are ready to listen with humility. We do not need saviors. We need you to be reflective, thoughtful, and willing to be changed by what you hear. And it is for future generations, a living archive, because the stories we tell now become the seeds that shape what comes next. Before we go any further, I want to say something about what you're about to hear and why it's here in the middle of this podcast, and will be in later episodes as well. In a lot of Western traditions, art and storytelling get separated. Art goes in one room, and the real content goes in another. One is a decoration, the other is information. That's not how story works in most Indigenous traditions. Art is not separate from storytelling. It is storytelling. Song, poetry, spoken word, movement, weaving, ceramics, sound. These are not interludes between important parts. They are part of how knowledge gets carried. They are part of how truth gets held. Think about it this way. Some things can't be explained. They have to be felt. They have to move through the body, through the breath, the chest, the memory that lives in the skin. That's what art does, that language alone cannot. It narrates through the senses. It makes story somatic, something you don't just understand, but something you experience. So when you see our episode art, hear a book excerpt being read, a poem, or a song in this series, we're not asking you to pause and wait for the real content to come back. This is the content. This is the story telling itself in a different register. One that may reach you in places that words alone cannot. What you're about to hear is rooted in land, in memory, in lineage. It doesn't need explanation. It just needs your presence. So let yourself hear the story in the music and let it land wherever it needs to land.
Sahimai hisulku Halloween holawai Iku awil akakiwo Sinuhi milimo Sinuhi malon Sinuhi alafish Ke alewa Ikuti Black is the night, there is no moon, but there are lots of stars. They dance in the north, they dance in the south, they dance in the east and west. Look at them,
There is no single native story, and this series will not pretend there is. Millennia of stories cannot be contained in 6 episodes, nor would we try. Our stories are rich and nuanced. You will hear voices across regions, Northern and Southern California, the coast and the interior, the mountains and the valleys. We say California, but we are people who existed long before California did. You will hear from rural communities and from people living in cities, because Indigenous life exists and belongs everywhere. You will hear from elders and from younger people, because this is an intergenerational conversation. You will hear many ways of practicing sovereignty, not just one definition, not just one model. That is how sovereignty works. Difference is our collective strength. All ecosystems are complex and built from many parts. That is how nature survives, and it is how our communities have carried so much forward, not in spite of their diversity, but because of it. Some advice to the listener. Listen slowly. You don't have to consume the series all at once. Pause between episodes. Let things settle. You may feel discomfort, grief, surprise, or joy. All of that is welcome. Not knowing is part of the process. You don't have to arrive with the right answers. You just have to show up honestly. Before we close this first episode, I want to leave you with a question. This is how we'll end every episode. The goal is not to have an answer, but to reflect and hold complexity. Maybe you feel inspired to share it with a friend or write it in a journal. However you choose to reflect, we invite you to do it after you listen. So here is our first reflection. Why are you here? What brought you here to this story in this moment? Yo toi. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, for choosing to be in relationship with these stories. This is just the beginning. In the next episode, we start by asking a harder question. Whose history have we been given? And whose has been buried? Before we wrap up, we want to invite you to something special. On Saturday, June 27th, Reclaiming Our Stories will be recorded live at the Autry Museum of the American West in Los Angeles. This live event will bring together voices from the podcast for an evening of conversation, storytelling, and reflection on Indigenous histories, cultures, and futures. If you'd like to experience the conversation in person, we hope you'll join us. You can learn more and reserve your spot at calhum.org.
Reclaiming Our Stories podcast is made possible with support from the 11th Hour Project, the Weingart Foundation, and By the People Conversations Beyond 250, a nationwide initiative led by the Federation of State Humanities Councils in partnership with the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. We also thank the Autry Museum of the American West for partnering with us in hosting our live podcast event. Together, these partners help make it possible to share stories that deepen understanding of the many cultures and histories that shape California.
To learn more about this podcast and the work of California Humanities, visit calhum.org. Until next time, keep listening because every story connects us to land, community, and to one another.